Something is happening right now in crypto. It's not that we got too big to fail. We're still ultra tiny, even as a whole sector, compared to any of our competitors in the traditional non-blockchain world. DeFi is a drop in the bucket compared to traditional finance. Here's what really happened. We got too compelling to fail. It's not our size, it's how much sense we're making. It takes a second to understand crypto. There's a learning curve. But once you understand it, the idea of being your own bank, of having non-confiscatable, non-inflatable money, that idea won't leave your brain. Luckily for us, this applies to policymakers in the world's capitals just as much as it does to their citizens. And we're seeing them reaching the tipping point right now. Ready? Let's go. Today, we're going to discuss Charles's recent trip to Washington, Coincenter suing the U.S. Treasury and OFAC over Tornado Cash sanctions, CNN being accused of an NFT rug pull. Yes, I did say CNN. A new partnership for AXO, some good progress from Liqwid, continued thievery in the robbery forest, and Virtua kicking off their launch of the rest of Virtua Prime outside of Cardano Island. If your first thought when you saw this image was, whoa, stay away from me with all that. I'm not trying to do regression therapy to relive my alien abduction, and I don't live in the 1800s, so I'm not interested in hypnotists or pocket watches. Or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Also, don't forget, tomorrow will be the very first long-form episode of Army of Spies featuring Yarick from AXO. I'm excited for this. This is going down at 8 p.m. UTC, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Charles is fresh back from DC FinTech Week, hosted by Georgetown Law and Professor Christopher Brummer. You'll remember Professor Brummer. He wrote the legal DAO wrapper paper that I covered on this channel. And at the time, I also pointed out that he might be the coolest law professor in all of North America, because right in his Twitter profile, he lets you know he's a fan of 90s hip hop and strong espressos. That would be the kind of professor that I would like. Charles is now back from DC FinTech Week, and he dropped this nice update video where he tried to paint a comprehensive picture of the entire lay of the land of regulation going forward for the near term. Everything that people are thinking about in DC, regulators, policymakers, he wanted to give us his best knowledge of everything that's happening in DC. So first of all, he wanted to remind everybody that midterm elections are happening in the US next month. This is when the US will elect 1/3 of the Senate. There's a bicameral legislature, there's a Senate and a House, 2 chambers. So they'll elect 1/3 of the Senate and all of the House. Charles believes it's very likely Republicans will at least take the House, while the Senate probably still up for grabs. Charles thinks the upshot of all this is that there will be a bipartisan crypto bill sometime in 2023 that will cover stablecoins. We've known for a long time that any comprehensive legislation that comes out of Congress was definitely going to cover stablecoins. They've made it very clear this is a hot button issue. Stablecoins must be addressed, and a lot of that is probably tied up in the research that the Fed is doing. The Fed, along with every other central bank in the world, is doing on CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. So they definitely are going to address stablecoins. So we'll get something that covers stablecoins at least, and probably, in Charles' view, something that gives the CFTC some power to regulate crypto. This second part is fantastic. The CFTC is where we want to be. We want the CFTC to be home of crypto regulation, not the SEC. Because if it's the SEC, we get Gary Gensler. One of those sounds a lot better than the other one. He says a lot of the debate is around what constitutes sufficient decentralization to determine if a coin is a security or a commodity. We've talked about this many times. Obviously, if it's a security, you land in the SEC. If it's a commodity, you land in the much more favorable CFTC. Charles' solution to this sufficient decentralization question is to open the lab at the University of Edinburgh on November 18th. So this is the lab we've talked about many times on this channel to measure decentralization of pretty much all the big coin projects, including Cardano. I mean, basically, I imagine they're just going to create a whole framework for measuring decentralization. And we'll kind of have this University of Edinburgh blockchain lab decentralization index, and that framework will be usable to evaluate the decentralization of probably any kind of crypto project you could come up with, which would be great because as soon as they have a good definition of decentralization, then they can move forward on this question of where do we draw the line? What is sufficient decentralization? If that's going to be the criteria for pushing us into the commodities world or the security world, let's go ahead, get a good metric, and then draw the line somewhere. He said, I'm putting words in his mouth. He didn't say all that, but he did talk about the blockchain lab and the measuring of decentralization at the University of Edinburgh. He said, there's also a lot of discussion around SROs and exchange level disclosure. So SROs are self-regulatory organizations. We'll talk about those a little bit more in a second. And on the subject of exchange level disclosures, he mentioned that not a lot of people know how much paperwork goes into trying to get a coin on a centralized exchange. He mentioned that in Japan, when they were dealing with regulators and centralized exchanges over there to get Cardano on an exchange in the very early days of Cardano, they had to make this enormous filing, a gargantuan filing. And he gave the exact page number. It was something unbelievable, but an unbelievable number of pages of documents to actually get on the centralized exchange. And it sounds like people in Washington understand that they could leverage the disclosure going on at that level. Here's where it starts getting interesting. Charles even mentioned the idea of crypto being in a post-Howey era. So that's very interesting when you think about the fact that this conference had a ton of regulators in attendance from the CFTC, the SEC, the DOJ. Charles also mentioned meeting with the chairman of the CFTC along with 2 other commissioners and a few members of Congress. The fact that anyone could go to Washington, meet with those types of policymakers and regulators, and come away talking about a post-Howey era is a very, very good sign because crypto doesn't fare very well under a Howey type analysis, as we covered in yesterday's video. We sort of looked at how those securities scorecards were being filled out for various blockchains. And when you go through the Howey test on the criteria laid out in those scorecards, crypto doesn't fare very well. I mean, we saw Ethereum getting a 2, not even a 1. Only Bitcoin and some very, very early cryptocurrencies were getting a 1, which was the best rating as far as being inconsistent with treatment as a security. And a lot of later blockchains were not doing as well, getting much higher scores, higher being bad. So Charles said he was struck by the reasonableness of the people involved and an openness to letting crypto regulate itself if it embraced self-regulatory organizations, standards, and consumer protections. This is huge progress. 5 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, 2 years ago, it wouldn't have seemed realistic to be talking about Washington being open to crypto regulating itself. It seemed like we were just waiting for the regulatory hammer of the SEC to drop on everything in crypto, probably DeFi first. We were just waiting for the heavy boot of the Washington regulators to come and crush as much of crypto, especially DeFi, as they could. This is the most optimistic I think I've ever heard the head of a blockchain, the head of the development company behind a blockchain, talk about a regulatory future. It sounds like we've done a good job in crypto, and the crypto virus has infected enough of the policymakers and regulators. They've started to see the same thing in crypto that we've seen all along, that if this whole thing is allowed to grow and thrive, and if it's nourished, it'll be great for everybody. Probably more importantly, they're hearing stories about the Chinese central bank digital currency. Charles spent quite a bit of time explaining in this video how there is very good technology behind the Chinese central bank digital currency, and that it's being very strongly linked to the Chinese Belt and Road and social credit systems, which means, and apparently Washington is very well aware of this, that pretty soon the Chinese digital yuan, which is linked to that social credit system and that Belt and Road system, could proliferate to not just millions of people or hundreds of millions of people, but possibly billions of people, given the ambitions of the Chinese Belt and Road project and how draconian and strict the social credit system has turned out to be. Obviously, that's not a future any of us in Western liberal democracies would be looking forward to for anyone in the world. So I think Washington has realized in order for the US to maintain its competitiveness, we've got to get out ahead of this crypto thing. We can't be left behind. It's hard to tell if this new regulatory optimism should be chalked up more to the more pro-crypto party coming to power in the US Congress, to the notion that maybe policymakers and regulators are finally seeing the genius of crypto like we have all along, or just straight fear that the digital yuan could become the reserve currency for a large swath of the world that's currently on the radar of the CCP for the Belt and Road project. I can't tell what it is, but whatever it is, I like it, and I think we're making some progress. In his update, Charles also mentioned that some very effective crypto lobbying is being done in Washington, and a lot of crypto money is being spent in Washington. And here we see an example of a group that's been doing some very good crypto lobbying. In this case, they're not so much lobbying as they are suing the Department of the Treasury, suing Janet Yellen in her capacity as the Secretary of the Treasury, along with OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, over their sanctioning of Tornado Cash. And the great thing about this complaint is that they do a really good job of laying out the privacy use case for something like Tornado Cash. At least they do a good job of laying out the privacy use case in crypto, why privacy is so important. They talk all about the public ledger and how the public ledger could be used to dox your identity in ways that would be detrimental even to very normal people using a blockchain just for, totally licit activities. And then they explain how Tornado Cash is, they call it the state-of-the-art privacy tool on Ethereum. This is exactly the kind of activity we want to see out of our legal crypto groups. Good job, Coincenter. Going from one end of the spectrum to the other, from very commendable behavior to something else. I don't want to use the term clown behavior, but definitely behavior that's made some crypto people very angry. Here's an article all about how CNN is facing accusations of an NFT rug pull. So apparently CNN launched an NFT program. They called their Vault NFT program. And it looks like it was centered around NFTs representing important historical, political things. Like, it looks like here's an NFT that had an original sell price of $500. CNN reports George W. Bush will win special edition. So it looks like after some period of time, CNN started characterizing their NFT Vault program as a 6-week experiment that had run its course. And you can see here, news of our own to share, Vault by CNN. The Vault team is honored to have partnered with amazing journalists, producers, artists, etc., etc. Vault was originally launched as a 6-week experiment, but the support and engagement from our community let us expand this project into something much larger. While we will no longer be developing or maintaining this community, the Vault NFT collection will live on. Head over to our Discord server for more on that. Thank you for joining us for a great year of journalism, art, and community. Vault by CNN. We learned a lot from our first foray into Web3. Thank you to each of you for your interest and engagement in what we built together. So the community apparently didn't quite agree that they were put on notice that this was just an experiment. Apparently, they believed that this NFT Vault program would go on for some time. So CNN, it looks like, has offered to give them back approximately 20% of the original mint price. On Discord, they're not happy about that. They say 20% is way low, 75% or higher. I will reach out to my lawyer this week. 6-week experiment was never conveyed to us. Literally a joke. It's all going to zero once you guys shut down. As an investor, I don't know if I can expect to break even in a few years, the Discord user wrote. Is CNN able to share why they think 20% is fair? Because to me, that implies they hopefully think we can break even or even make profits within a few years. If not, then this seems like a rug pull. What optimism are they basing the rebate percentage on? People in their Discord obviously not happy. And CNN seems to have pretty casually, based on their post here on Twitter, it looks like they pretty casually just decided it wasn't in their best interest to continue this NFT program any longer. It's kind of hard to differentiate this behavior from normal rug pull behavior. In this case, we know who it is. I mean, it's not like they're anonymous. We know who CNN is, but they kind of did the same thing. It looks like AXO is announcing a new partnership. They say, we are pleased to announce a partnership with IAMX Identity, a self-custody and identity management platform. There are numerous exciting avenues that we look forward to exploring together. IAMX seems to be everywhere. We just saw them in the Endmaker news. Seems like they are partnering up with a lot of different platforms in our space. Also on the DeFi front, Liqwid had an update. They say, greetings, Cardano community. The on-chain and off-chain portions of our initial Oracle and liquidation contracts are built. Oracle created and updated with CLI on preview testnet, and they give you links to the first transaction and the second transaction. This sounds like good progress. I know a lot of people are looking forward to this one. Also, we can't miss out on covering the ongoing thievery in the robbery forest. This time, it was Mango Markets on Solana that was hacked for an incredible 116 million. I know you're thinking to yourself, what are you talking about? Solana was actually running long enough to get hacked? Yes, Solana was on long enough to get hacked. Mango Markets, they took them for 116 million, which is a lot of money. But in the context of robbery forced events, it's a tiny hack. We've seen such gigantic ones that now 116 million seems like a small amount. Of course, not to the people who lost those funds. To those people, probably seems like a gigantic amount. The interesting thing about this particular hack, besides the fact that Solana was actually running in order to get hacked, was that the attacker put forward a governance proposal to send back 50 million. Sounds good so far. Send back 50 million of the 116 million, but keep 70 million. So the attacker would send back 50 million and get to keep 70 million. And of course, the attacker's contingency on this was that no criminal investigation would be pursued against the hacker. No freezing of funds would be allowed against the attacker. And if that were to occur, then the attacker would be so kind to send back 50 million and get to keep their 70 million. Of course, sounds like the attacker has some governance tokens, and the attacker went ahead and used those governance tokens to vote yes on the proposal. So it looks like the robbery forest is busy as usual, and it is definitely the place you should go if you are the prince in the kingdom and you want all of your jewels to be stolen. Finally, we've known all along that Cardano Island was just one part of the entire Virtua metaverse, Virtua Prime. There would be other islands in Virtua Prime, and it looks like Virtua is now giving us a glimpse of what some of those other areas in Virtua Prime are going to look like, and it looks like they're going to open up a land sale of some of these other areas in Virtua Prime. I think this is great. I think it always sounded better if Cardano Island was just one island, was not just one island. It was just one island among many. So we'd have some other neighbors. It sounds like this next island is going to be Virtua Island. But I hope we're sort of joined by a bunch of other islands, a bunch of people from their blockchains. I think it'd be great if they were in there. They could even come and visit our Cardano Island. Of course, Cardano Islands can be the best, so we probably won't even want to go visit their islands. But I think it'd be nice if we let them come visit our island. So it looks like there's kind of a prehistoric thing going on here with Virtua Island. That looks kind of interesting. Here you can see kind of a map. You can see there's quite a few different islands here shown in this image on Virtua Prime. I don't know how many islands we're going to end up with on Virtua Prime, or even if Virtua Prime will be the only planet in the Virtua ecosystem. But I could imagine this could just keep expanding and expanding. Maybe we'll end up with a whole solar system of Virtua metaverses. Even despite that, I'm sure Cardano Island will always be the prime location in the entire Virtua universe. I hope you're having a great day. Don't forget, tomorrow will be the very first episode of Army of Spies long form. Going to have on a very interesting guest, Yarrick from AXO. That will be going down at 8 p.m. UTC, 10 p.m. CET, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 a.m. Bangkok, 7 a.m. Sydney. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.